Okay, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the OWASP track. I'm the first person in the OWASP track here, and I'm here to tell you about this wonderful OWASP project, which I like a lot and contribute a lot, called OWASP Nettacker. My name is Stepanyan. I come all the way from London. I'm OWASP London chapter leader, and I'm also currently on the OWASP Global Board, so I'm OWASP Global Board member. There is another person who was supposed to be here, my co-leader of the project, Arkady Yakovets, or ARK. Unfortunately, couldn't make it to Oslo, so it's just me. But you can catch us both if you go to the OWASP Global AppSec conference in Vienna, which is happening on June 25th, 26th. So go and ask your employer to send you to Vienna, because OWASP runs two global conferences a year, one in Europe and one in USA, and the one in Europe this year is in Vienna, and we're going to be in Vienna for the next 3 years. And the conference in USA is going to be in November, and that's going to be in San Francisco. So if you didn't know, please do check it out, and I hope to see you in Vienna again. So again, quickly, a mandatory Who Am I slide. The reason why I have the Who Am I slide, because I'm an application security consultant and architect working in the City of London in financial services. So I'm originally a developer. I come from a development background. So NDC is very close to my heart. Been leading OWASP London chapter since 2015 and been on the OWASP board since 2024. So all in all, if you look at who am I am an application defender. However, I'm here to talk about project, which consists of words network attacker. So why am I application defender is talking to you about network attacker. So by the show of hands, how many of you heard of this huge vulnerability in MOVEit or MOVEit, which happened recently? Cool. Yeah, you can see some people. Yeah, that was big vulnerability recently. There was this, well, back when Jen Easterly was the head of CISA, right? Remember Citrix bleed vulnerability? That was another one. Lots of organizations around the world using Citrix. So that was another very big one. And Ivanti, a lot of people use Ivanti, VPN, and mobile device manager. So people who work in different companies, these kind of vulnerabilities are very close to the heart, because when it happens, it's a critical vulnerability. And then the first thing that happens when you hear about all these big vulnerabilities is, do we have these devices somewhere on our network, and are they vulnerable? And how do you know? Right? So what if I told you that OWASP has a project which is absolutely free and open source, which can actually help you to do this? And this is how I got introduced to Nettacker myself. I'm not the original author of Nettacker. It was created by a different team. I kind of adopted it. But what happened is in 2018, I got a message from original Nettacker leaders saying, hey guys, we are coming to London to Black Hat Europe 2018, and we want to, due to speak, introduce OWASP Nettacker project. And unfortunately, due to some travel issues, we cannot travel. Because you're OWASP London chapter leaders, can you guys come and present this project? And we said, of course, OWASP is a great community. In the community spirit, we will help you out. There's one little problem. We have no idea what Nettacker is. And I said, not to worry, we'll jump on a Zoom session and we'll show you what this project is. And so we jumped on this Zoom session. We absolutely loved the project. It was like, oh my God, this is like the best thing since sliced bread. I had no idea someone created a project like this for OWASP. So myself and my chapter co-leader at the time, Dr. Gregorius Frakos, we went to Black Hat. You see our booth there, Black Hat Arsenal. And again, to those people who don't know, the Black Hat in London, Black Hat EU, we have Arsenal track, just like in America, and it's free. So you don't have to pay thousands of dollars for your ticket price if you want to come and look at lots of open source projects. There's a track called Arsenal, and you're more than welcome to come and check out lots of open source projects. But we did showcase the project, we demoed it, and then suddenly this happened. All these people turned up and started looking at our screen. And lots of these people were security engineers, penetration testers, just people from organizations wondering how they can use this tool. And we said, okay, this is great. Let's try to do this again. So in 2019, We did it again, and even bigger crowds turned up and they started looking at the screen. And I'm like, okay, we're onto something here. So it's not just me loving the project, right? So at this point, I already became a project leader and started maintaining it. So, and there's another little thing that happened. If you go to github.com/OWASP and you sort it based on the number of stars, you'll actually find out that Nettacker is the number 6. It's in OWASP top 10 on GitHub stars. As you know, when someone likes your open source repository on GitHub, they star it. And apparently we are number 6 based on the number of stars. Top 6 most starred OWASP repo on GitHub. So what is this OWASP Nettacker project? So just like all OWASP projects, it's open source software, but it exists to help things like information gathering, reconnaissance, and automating penetration testing tasks. It is so popular because it is written in 100% Python, which is very accessible language. And very important thing is that it does not rely on launching any external tools, because there are lots of similar tools out there, but what they do, they launch other tools, like they will launch Nmap, they will launch Metasploit, they will launch something else. So they're orchestrators, they're not actually scanners themselves. So another very important thing to note, that Nettacker was written by students, and that's by students participating in Google initiative called Google Summer of Code. So if you don't know what Google Summer of Code, but you know a student, right? So Google Summer of Code is an initiative by Google, which is a kind of a paid internship, but it's not, right? The idea here that Google encourages students to contribute to open source projects over summer break. Yeah. So if you June, July, August, if you're a student, you can do something. You can do a bar job or do something else, or you can volunteer and help improve open source software. So Google Summer of Code invites lots of open source organizations, and OWASP is one of them, but there are lots of others, Apache, Mozilla, Python, there are lots of open source foundations participating. And then the way it works is that students, they apply, they write a proposal, how and why they want to improve an open source project of their liking. And then these proposals get graded, and then Google allocates slots. And the students then work with mentors from the open source organization throughout the summer on the tasks that they define. So they have a plan, they have a midterm assessment, and at the end of the summer, if they're successful, OWASP, with OWASP or with whatever organization that they are working with, Google then at the end will pay them a stipend. Okay, so there is a little bit of money at the end of it, which motivates students a little bit more. But so if you know a student, please tell them about this initiative. It's starting right now, so it usually runs from March. So March is the time when we start collect proposals from students. And obviously it ends in September. And OWASP participates every year, and Nettacker was one of the projects there. Since then, Google changed the term slightly, so there are longer projects if you want to do them, because you can run them all the way until Christmas time. And they also changed the criteria, so you don't have to be a full-time student. So that is another thing which was removed. So OWASP Nettacker is a tool, right? It's in my opinion, very useful tool, but it's like a Swiss Army knife tool. So it has collection of tools, which are modules. And just like with Swiss Army knife, you can pull different blades out of your knife. The same thing, you can use different modules. You can create your own modules. They are written in YAML language. Because it's using Python's multi-threading, it's quite fast. And it has what we call customizable profiles. And these are basically bundles of modules which are focused on a specific task. So you can pull several blades out of your Swiss Army knife and use them together to perform a particular task. And most importantly, this is why I hope you're here, because it can run from the command line, you can run it from a GitHub action or your favorite pipeline tool, which means it's highly automatable, which is really, really great. And another very distinctive thing about Nettacker, which sets it apart from other similar tools, is that it has a built-in database, so it stores all the results that it finds, and it also has a web UI, so you can launch it in web UI mode, and straight away you have a web interface where you can search all the findings. And it also has an API if you wish to integrate it with other tools. So the most frequently asked questions when I present Nettacker people say, okay, Sam, what's the difference between Nettacker and other tools? For example, there's a Burp Suite and a Zap. And the difference is that Burp Suite and Zap, they scan just one website for many web application vulnerabilities, whatever the scanner is able to find, right? So the way how Zap and Burp work, they crawl one website, one main domain, to discover all the URIs, parameters, all the forms, all the buttons. So it clicks everything to find vulnerability in just one. So this is when you do penetration testing, for example, you will pen test just one thing, right? Nettacker is slightly different because it's a mass scanner. So it allows you to scan one or many, and that could be hundreds or thousands of IP addresses, networks, subdomains. And what is it scanning them for? For open ports, or one or more specific vulnerabilities that you define what you want to find, and you list them in yourself in a command line. You say, I want to check for this vulnerability, or I want to find if the ports are open, or I want to find if certificates are expired. But there's another interesting thing that Nettacker does. It has a brute forcing module. So where can you find Nettacker? You can find it on OWASP website, owas.org/Nettacker. So we have a web page there. And we, of course, are on GitHub. So I'll put a QR code there, but it's very easy to find. Just github.com/owasp/Nettacker. We also have a Docker image. So if you prefer to use Docker, we have an official OWASP/Nettacker Docker image on Docker Hub. And we also exist in some Linux distributions. So unbeknown to me, Black Arch Linux, which is a very popular Linux distribution for penetration testing, they included Nettacker. I'm still waiting for Kali Linux to say something about this, but hopefully in the next version of Nettacker. But if you use Black Arch, and a lot of pen testers are using Black Arch, it's a preferred operating system, you will find Nettacker already built in. And another surprise that I found that Nettacker was included in Striker app. So Striker app is a kind of pen testing app for which you can install on your mobile phone like this. So you can actually perform pen testing from your phone. And I've discovered that these guys adopted Nettacker. It's an open source tool, so and open source license. So we're very pleased to see that people are using it. Now, what does Nettacker do, right? So Nettacker consists of three types of modules. Modules of type scan, so you can scan for something. For example, you can scan for open ports, right? It can scan for different versions of particular software that you have installed. It can scan for any technologies that you have on the network. It has a vuln module, type of module, so you can search for specific vulnerability, for example, Apache Struts vulnerability or a specific CVE number. And it has a module type of brute or brute forcing. For example, you can perform brute forcing using SSH and try the combination of usernames and passwords out of a dictionary. So this is just a short selection of some of the Nettacker scan modules. I'll highlight it with asterisk some of the interesting ones. For example, admin scan will allow you to scan your network for any URLs which have administrative consoles, control panels and things like that. CMS detection scan will find all the content management systems. It will find any instances of WordPress, Drupal, for example, on your or Joomla on your network. Directory scanner is similar to Directory Buster. If you know this, it's a directory name brute forcer. It will scan the target and try to find what kind of popular folder names are there. So you can find all the images, you can find all the documents, you can, of course, find some other interesting confidential stuff. You can find Git folders, right? So that's the kind of module that it has. Of course, it also it has ICMP scan, so you can scan your network and see what's on your network. What responds to pings on your network. Again, a very useful tool to do the asset inventory of your network. PMA scan, this module stands for PHP My Admin. So those people who use PHP and MySQL know that PHP-MyAdmin is a very popular tool for managing MySQL databases, and it is an open source tool. But the problem with this tool is a lot of people install it in default configuration, so they never change the default username and password. So trying to find how many people have it exposed, particularly on the internet, right? Do you know in your organization, if you use PHP, you're exposing this because that is a risk, of course, from the information security perspective. Of course, we have a port scanner, another very useful, probably one of the most useful modules. We have a subdomain scanner. So you can just give it mycompany.com, and it will go and find all the subdomains of your company.com, and then you can go and scan each individual subdomain. Another interesting ones, for example, WordPress. Again, if you're a WordPress user and then you're one of 46% of the internet who use WordPress, you can scan the versions and find out if you're using the vulnerable one. And we have modules for scanning for WordPress plugins and WordPress themes, and including things like user enumeration and some of other vulnerabilities. The vulnerability modules, we have a lot of them without CVE, but we also have a lot of them with CVEs, namely the things like Heartbleed and Citrix Bleed, Microsoft Exchange vulnerability. Lots of them. I'm not going to. We have over 120 modules at the moment. But just so you know what we have, some other interesting ones here. For example, we have a self-signed certificate vulnerability. Again, I don't know people actually using self-signed certificate, or if you have expired certificate, or server version vulnerability is when your web server is leaking its version in the server header. So which is also a security weakness, because, for example, an attacker who is scanning your network, they can find out, oh, you use a particular version of Apache or Nginx. It's vulnerable, so I can attack you. Using a particular version of Microsoft IS, it's vulnerable, I can attack you. So this is why it is so useful. And then we have brute force modules. So we have FTP brute forcing, HTTP basic auth brute force. HTTP form is the kind of standard your login form when you have username and password. NTLM brute forcing, SMTP. So you can try to brute force your SMTP servers and find the password like this. SSH brute forcing, Telnet brute forcing, WordPress XML RPC brute forcing, which is actually quite useful because a lot of WordPress installations usually use weak passwords, so you can find them easily. And recently we had a new module which is SMB brute forcing, so you can find network shares on the network which use either default credentials or weak credentials. And speaking of credentials, Nettacker originally was known as OWASP IoT Scan, and it still is a Twitter handle, because the original idea when the creators of Nettacker created it was that you scan your network for IoT devices, and then you scan your IoT device for open ports, and then you brute force for default credentials, for example, admin. And this is something which is quite a popular use case for Nettacker, because you can scan your whole network and find any devices which respond to default credentials. So I'm going to do a live demo today because it's a tool. I need to show you how it works, right? I'm not going to just show you slides. But a responsible use warning is important because Nettacker is an offensive security tool, okay? So just like any offensive security tool, it has some of the modules which are kind of passive reconnaissance, so they don't send any traffic, and they have active reconnaissance modules, so actually send some traffic. And it could be benign looking traffic, so you can just go and say, well, respond to a ping, or you can say, okay, I'm just going to connect to the website and see what's the title of that website, of that web page. But there are vulnerability scanning modules, which are, of course, if you use this without permission, you will be breaking the law. So it's very important if you perform it for pen testing, only pen test the networks that you are allowed to test, and of course use it in your lab or inside your organization when you have permission. Okay, now the first thing first, so let me just quickly switch to Nettacker window here. First time I ran Nettacker, it came up with all this long list of different options, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is, right? It's like very difficult to read. How do I use this thing, right? And then when I figured out how to use it, because I couldn't run it. I couldn't figure out how to run it. It's actually very simple. You need at least two things to run Nettacker. You need to give it a target and which module you're going to use. So you have a -I, and you have to define the target, and -m, which module. For example, if you want to scan IP address 192.168.1.149 for performing port scans, you just define the IP address. But because the name of the tool is the Nettacker or network attacker or network scanner, you can give it the whole network. And that is the biggest strength of Nettacker. Instead of scanning just one website or one IP address or one URL, that's what all the other scanners do. Nettacker can do that, so you can scan just one IP address, but it can also scan the whole range of IP addresses. So you can give it a starting IP address and ending IP address. You can give it the whole network in the CIDR notation. For example, this will do the same as the top line, so it will scan 255 different IP addresses. You can also give it a domain name, and again, which is really cool. So if I give it OWASP.org, and you can use domain name just to scan that one IP address under one domain name, or you can scan all the subdomains of your domain. So with OWASP.org, in a demo, you'll see I will find all the subdomains. Or it can scan specific URLs, and you can give it URLs in HTTP or HTTPS format. Okay, and there's another way how you can scan things. So this is not all, right? Because it's like, okay, I can scan network subdomains, but you can, if you work in a large organization, you will have multiple domains, right? Because you will own different brand names. You will have multiple networks because probably you have branches in different regions or different cities, right? So it means you'll have different areas. So what you can do is you can create a text file, and in that text file, you will put all the domains of that you own, all the IP address ranges that you own, and you can scan them like that. For example, for OWASP, I can create OWASP text file, and I will put OWASP.org, OWASP.com, and I will put the IP addresses which belong to the organization. And another cool thing before I show you the demo is that Nettacker allows you to run several modules together, right? So I can, for example, run a port scan, and I can run a phpMyAdmin scan at the same time. And I can also, for example, here I can do a port scan and do a server version vulnerability discovery to see which, if we have anything on the network which is leaking the server version, right? And of course, we also do a subdomain enumeration. So I'm going to show you. This is a very useful command, so you can use it on your own organization if you have permission. But for OWASP.org, we do have permission because OWASP participates in background bug bounty. So we give explicit permission to security researchers to perform security scans. Okay, so let me now switch to my Nettacker demo here. And again, if I run it with nothing, right, you will get this help. Okay, hopefully this is visible. So now what I'm going to try to do, let me just see if I can resize this window a little bit and bring it up like that, maybe. Okay. I'm going to give it a target, which is at OWASP.org, right, as a domain. And I'm going to give it a module, okay? By default, let me just give it a port scan, right, like this, okay? So this is all that it needs to start. As you can see, when it starts, it will tell you that it loaded lots of modules, and you can see it started discovering ports already. And you can see that it has threads, right? You can see it's now on thread 78 out of 1005. You can control how many threads it launches, so which is very useful. So you can slow it down, and compared with Nmap, for example, people who use Nmap, they know it can be quite damaging if you just run it by default. I know there are some network switches which are blown by it, but Nettacker is very gentle to a network, and there you go, straight away we perform the scan of OWASP.org, and you can see that we have ports 443, 80, 80, 80, and 8443 open, and you can see all the headers that were returned. So this is just on the OWASP.org as a website. But what you can do as well is, for example, let me change this and say, okay, just give me the HTTP status scan, okay? And that will try to connect and check if we actually have a web server there. Okay, let me actually do something else. I need to suppress the port scan because I've already done it. Okay, and as you can see, it tells that we have 400, 301, and 200, depending on which IP we connect. But what we can do now, I can change it to HTTP title scan, and you will see what it will become useful, because I can now scan the network and see what is the title of each page. It's HTML, let's say HTML title scan. Okay, and you see the title is OWASP Foundation, the Open Source Foundation for Application Security. But this was just an IP address, so this is just the website to which OWASP.org resolves. But if I add the magic switch -s, which is subdomains, something magical will happen, because now the subdomain discovery tool is going to go and discover all the subdomains of OWASP.org, and then it's going to contact every single one using HTTP and HTTPS, see if these ports are responding, and will give you the HTML titles of all the subdomains. So here we have OWASP Gen AI project. Here we have LLM OWASP.org. Here we have OWASP Austin chapter. And look at this. We have training. We have BLT. We have mail. Right? We have OWASP Nest policies. All the subdomains. So the OWASP Security Champions Guide. So you can just run this, and straight away you now have an inventory of your network, everything which is listening on the web ports. And it can be useful because sometimes I scan networks of some of my customers, and suddenly the things pop up there like, oh, this is like a private control panel for, I don't know, for the legal department, or this is another confidential system. It's like, why is it exposed on the internet, right? And people say, oh, this is a very good tool that you found. There's another interesting thing that you can find, right? Combine this with a port scan. One very popular question that you can answer, and this is one of the scans that I perform, is there anything listening on port 22, right? Because obviously, if you are not intending to expose SSH, right, there should be nothing listening on port 22. And if something is listening there, it's either intentional or it is a misconfiguration, because usually what is listening on port 22, there are things like Linux machines or devices, right, which should not really be visible from the outside, right? So okay, I'm trying to do this pen test of my own organization now, of OWASP. Again, the reason why it failed here, because I had to define the like this, /G for the port number. And I'm going to scan all the subdomains again. So the first thing, as you can see, it's going to do, it's going to go and try to find every single subdomain. And then it's going to run a port scan and try to find, do we still have anything listening on that port? Why is it useful to you as well? Because if you use cloud, I hope you use cloud, so your developers might be spinning up things in AWS Cloud and Azure Cloud and Google Cloud and leaving it unprotected, right? And you will have no idea what you have running. So what we call shadow IT or shadow cloud, right? Nowadays we have shadow AI, which we are not finding yet, but hopefully we will. But as you can see, Nettacker found that we have cloud.owasp.org, which is listening on port 22, and it responds with SSH, OpenSSH version 8. And then we have lists.owasp.org, which is also listening on port 22, and it's running OpenSSH version 9. So that's already very useful information that we can gather from here, right? And one other thing that you can see here, after Nettacker runs, right, it produces reports. So I'll talk about reports a bit later. But obviously, the scans that I'm currently running right now, I'm running them from outside, right? So I'm outside here on the network in Oslo, and I'm running a scan of everything in my organization on OWASP.org that can be seen from outside. But the beauty of Nettacker is that you can install this tool internally on your network, because it doesn't require any other tools, it doesn't require calls to any other external systems, and you can perform scans of your internal networks and get that information, right? And you can scan and find out all the versions of software that you're using, anything vulnerable, anything with expired certificates, and of course any vulnerabilities and anything which is using default credentials. Let me show you one other thing. Again, hopefully our IT people hardened our organization, so nothing should be leaking the server version banner, right? But let me just run this test. So we have this server version 1, okay? And I want to see if we have anywhere on our network any server which is leaking its server version. And to make it a little bit more fun, right, I will add dash feed. So the dash feed is verbose. So the attacker now is going to show a lot of information. So this is how it's actually working. So you can see all the internal workings of it trying to connect to all the subdomains of OWASP.org. And it's trying to extract the information from HTTP connection and see if any of our subdomains are actually leaking the server banner. And you can see all the threads going on. So it's quite a fun thing to show for the demo. But obviously, it slows down the scanner a little bit. So in real life, you might want to keep that option off. But once it's done scanning of every single subdomain of OWASP, hopefully we will find if we have anything misconfigured, right? And let me actually see if it's doing it as I wanted to do it. A second. Yeah. So as you can see here, it ran all the network port scans on everything. But here is the price that I was after. You can see we have some the subdomain called giving.owasp.org. So this was a website created for Giving Tuesday. So as you know, it's a day in America when people donate before the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So, and we actually have Nginx version 129.5. So you can see how useful this is and how quickly I've discovered that. So you can combine all these modules as well, and you can launch them in bunches. So basically, you don't need to remember all the particular module names. If you know what you're looking for, you can perform scans, for example, of any websites which have missing security headers as well, which is another thing. And you can use profiles. So instead of using -m, you can just say --profile HTTP. And what this will do, okay, let me just disable port scan because that will be much slower. This will now load up all the modules, right? And obviously it's now squishing my machine to its end because obviously I don't have enough memory. But it will perform all the different scans. And you can see, for example, I stopped it because it started admin scan and started finding some of the files that may have been left over on the server. So this is very, very useful type of scan. Okay, so this is this situation that we can have profiles. And these are the profiles that we have. We have profile of type info, so it will do all the information gathering. It has a profile of type scan, so it will run all the scan modules. Profile brute will run all the brute forcing. Vul will run all the vulnerabilities. We have a specialist profile called SSL, so this will perform all the SSL weaknesses scan. It will find any self-signed SSL certificates, any certificates, any service which are running TLS ciphers which are weak as well, and expired certificates. Again, as you know, expired certificates, even though it's year 2026, is a major problem nowadays because services go down. You know, Facebook went down, OpenAI went down because someone forgot to renew the certificate. Citrix will find all the Citrix-related scans and vulnerability in Ivanti. We'll also find all the Ivanti-related stuff. And if you just want to run all the modules, right, and we just use all. So all will run everything, but obviously this will be a slow scan. Preferably you will be running it either overnight or it will take several hours. Okay, let me now show you this graph that I have as well. So if I go and perform another scan, for example, we go and perform this title scan again. So you can see when the attacker finishes working, it will give us the report. And the report is available in several formats. So by default, the report is available in HTML. And there you go. And you can see here it says report saved. And this is the path to this HTML report. So let me just try to get that line if my touchpad behaves well. No. Okay, I will try it again. Easier to do it with a mouse. Okay, looks like I got it. Now let me try to open another tab here and just paste here. All right. As you can see here, this is the report that we get, and it shows us in tabular format. Let me just make the font a little bit bigger, so you can see here. It will show us all the subdomains that were discovered, and then in the tabular format, we will see all the titles. Again, you see this is BLT. You can see all the headers here, and you can export all of this as well, that information as well. Okay. And another thing that it can do, it can show you this information in the graph format, like this, and you can then see, for example, for OWASP.org. It's quite easily to graphically see what was happening. So for example, you can see for OCMS, OWASP.org, you can see that there were 2 hits on 2 modules, server version vuln and subdomain scan. And on the main OWASP.org, there was server version vuln module run. And you can see because it forks, that means it found it on 2 different ports. And then you will see all the subdomains. So it's quite a useful thing to have. Now, when you scan it for a particular vulnerability, we can also scan it for a particular version. For example, we have this very useful module which was used by people using MoveIt or Move IT Transfer, which had lots of vulnerabilities, including SQL injection. I couldn't believe, but yes, 25 years of OWASP and we still have SQL injection. And the highlighted version here, you can see this is the vulnerable version which had SQL injection. So here, because I had a pen test of a very large telecoms company in the UK, and I ran it with this module. I didn't use any other modules. I just used this MoveIt because they come and say, "Oh, we know we have MoveIt, but we don't know which one is vulnerable because there are so many of them in different cities, different regions. Can you help us find the vulnerable one?" And I said, "Yep, very easy, free and open source, still OWASP Nettacker." I just ran it on all the subdomains of this telecoms company, and lo and behold, straight away, I found the vulnerable version. So you can do exactly the same thing in your organizations. Now, with the reports that I showed you, the beauty of them, they're being generated not just HTML format, because HTML is quite useful for us humans, but also generates reports in JSON format, which is useful to machines because you can integrate it with other systems because you'll get the structured data. But most importantly, the export format that I like the most is CSV, because you can get a spreadsheet. You can run the scanner on your network. It will find all your servers, all your open hosts, all your versions of all the software that you run, all your expired certificate, and you will get a nice spreadsheet. And why spreadsheet is good? Again, a lot of people hate spreadsheets, but I like them because I don't have to run the scanner again. I don't have to tell people this is how you log in. I can just get that spreadsheet. I can email it to people. I can filter it. And because the way how spreadsheet export works is exactly the same what Nettacker does. The information will only be on the spreadsheet if it finds something. If it found an open port, there will be a line here. See, it found an open port 80, the line is there. If it found a title calling Atlassian proxy, okay, we know what you're running. So you can see these are all our Cloudflare. There you go. There's some subdomains who are using Nginx. This is very, very useful. And here you can see in the spreadsheet, you also have username and passwords. And username and passwords are usually for brute forcing. So if you run a brute forcing module, it will run it against a dictionary of known username and passwords. And again, you can provide your own dictionary of usernames and passwords. And it will basically try to log in with all these credentials to every single device on your network. Okay, and one of the things that I used Nettacker recently, again, I used it in London for a financial services organization. It was one of the world's largest banks, and this bank has lots of CCTV cameras, right? They have cameras all over the place in the rooms and branches. And I think it's because there were different contractors which installed these cameras. The question that they had when they were running the assessment, they said, "Sam, how can we find out if any of these cameras were installed with default credentials? Admin. They had 4,000 cameras." So I said, hold my beer. I'm going to run Nettacker. So I ran Nettacker on all the networks. I didn't know the camera. I said, okay, try to log in with admin, and out of 4,000 IP addresses, 7 of them came back with admin admin. They were very, very thankful because no other tool, well, even commercial tool, right, would have had, they wouldn't know what to use, how to use, how to quickly, and I gave them a spreadsheet. So that was very useful to them. Now, that is not all, because Nettacker also has a built-in API and a web server. So you can run it in a web UI mode. And if you start Nettacker with --start API command line, it will start a Flask web server. So Flask is a Python default web server. And by default, it will listen on localhost and port 5000. And it's an SSL-based server. So it will have a self-signed certificate. But if you're using Nettacker in your organization, you can actually install it on a server or run it in a Docker container, and you can give it a certificate from your own organization, so it doesn't complain. So when I try to connect, you will see that it will complain that the certificate is not signed. The web UI looks like this, so we're improving it at the moment, but the case, you log into it using API key, and when you start Nettacker with the start API, you get the API key, which is randomly generated, which will allow you to log in, and once you're inside, you can start a new scan or using the modules, and all the modules are color-coded, or you can look at the results of previous scans. So let me try this. Let's do a live demo. So I'll go back to Nettacker. I will start it again, but instead of giving it a target to scan and the modules, I'm just going to say --start API. Okay. So what should happen now? It will still load itself up, but you see it gave us an API key here. And you can see now it's running on all the IP addresses on my machine. So it has a local host 5000. So I'll just copy this API key, and I'll go back to a web browser. I'll open HTTPS localhost 5000. Obviously, as I told you, it will say that certificate is self-signed. And I'll say that's perfectly fine. So it will say, OK, you need to have an API key. Without the API key, you cannot log in. I'll paste the API key, and now I'm logged in. So here, we can see the results of all our previous scans, okay, which is very useful. And we can download, and if I just click on this, it will give me the HTML file, and I can open it and look at it like this. I can also export it in a CSV or JSON as I want. But the most important thing is crawler, because you can search through all of them. Because all the previous scans that we run, they're not lost. They are stored in a built-in database, and built-in database is SQLite. But you can also use in enterprise MySQL or Postgres. And Postgres, of course, is probably the most popular choice for enterprise databases. And you can see here, we have a search engine. So if I want to go and look for something, for example, let me try and go and search for port 22. Say, where did I have port 22? And lo and behold, it shows me that these were the lists, OWASP.org, cloud.owas.org, where we had port 22. And I can download that information in CSV format if I want to. I can just open it. And here you can see, here's our graph. When we run the tests of lists.owas.org, we can see that we perform this many port scans. This was the target. This is how many times we found port 22. And we got information here that it was actually running SSH version 9. You can see I'm still in web UI. And remember, somewhere we had Nginx, right? So where do we have Nginx in our network? So I can go and search for Nginx. And lo and behold, that was giving.owas.org. So the use case for this is like a showdown for your internal network. You take Nettacker, you run it in your internal network. You discover everything that you have running, all the vulnerabilities, all the open ports, all the different systems, and then you have a search engine to search internally, and it's free and open source. And I had one very large charitable organization based in the UK, and I was doing a demo at Black Hat, and the guy who was the chief technical officer for this big charity approached me and said, thank you so much. He said, because this is such a needed thing for us, because we're doing a lot of research. We have a lot of servers running everywhere. We have a lot of labs because of the nature of that charity. And we have no idea what we have, right? And now we're starting to use this tool to understand and find all the servers on all the open ports within our organization, and also all the vulnerabilities. So that's the web UI on it. Again, you can also start a scan with it if you want. So if you go to new scan, again, you can go and submit a new scan. So similarly here, I can go and say I want to scan OWASP.org. Okay, that's the only thing I'm going to scan, as I'm allowed to scan it, but you can scan anything on any IP address. I can do a skip service discovery, so it doesn't do a port scan. You can see here we have all the different profiles, and we have all the different scan methods. They are sorted alphabetically, and you can see everything in red is a vulnerability scan. Everything in green is a regular scan, like a version scan, and everything in orange is a brute forcing scan. A simple color coding here to help you. For example, we can use this strict transport security vulnerability, so it will find any sites which are missing or misconfigured strict transport security header, and you can define what kind of graph you want. You can have a version 2, version 3, and you can also use different languages. So Nettacker has localized versions, so localized messaging in different languages. So again, I'm not sure if we have Norwegian. Maybe we do. But yeah, if we don't, then that could be an easy contribution for you. Maybe submit the Norwegian version of it, which will work everyone, help everyone. And then here we have an advanced tab. And in an advanced tab, you can define whether you want to scan the IP range, whether you want to scan subdomains of OWASP.org, yes. Whether you want to ping before you scan, how many threads you want to launch, how many threads per host you want to launch, here's how many retries, how long you want to sleep in between requests, if you want to use verbose level, which ports you want to scan, right? By default, for example, if I just leave it at 443, you can use SOX proxy. So if you don't have direct access to the network, you can scan it through a SOX proxy. And you can define if you want to exclude certain ports, which is also useful. Why is it useful? Because you can use Nettacker to scan your entire network and say, okay, I'm not interested in ports 80 and 443. I know there will be web service everywhere. I'm interested in everything else. What other ports do we have open? So you can go and exclude ports 80 and 443. It's a very typical example, and scan for everything else. Okay. You can also include specific headers. For example, if you need to authenticate with a specific header, like a bearer header, you can add it here. And if you're running a brute forcing scan, you can give it a list of all the usernames that you want to try to log in with, and a list of passwords that you want to log in with. And it will try all the combinations, all the permutation of username and passwords to perform the brute forcing. And then when you click the submit button to start the scan, and it will start the scan in the background, and it will do exactly the same as it did before. And basically, once the scan is ready, you will see it appearing here, and you can see that for this demo, they run 19 scans with the timestamps here. So that is a very useful thing here as well. Now, back in 2017, Jeremiah Grossman, who is one of our application security legends, the guy who created White Hat, he tweeted and he said, I suggest that OWASP Top 10 2017 includes A0 or asset inventory, because these days the biggest application security risks are websites that you don't know that you own. Why? Because if you don't know what you own, you cannot possibly secure it, right? And Nettacker helps you solve this problem. And these are some use cases. So asset discovery is number one. You can scan your network for open ports, for all the hosts, scan network for default credentials. You can scan it for for specific vulnerability. I'll show you, for example, a screenshot of Microsoft Exchange CVE that Nettacker was one of the first tools on the market to actually find this vulnerability. You can monitor subdomains and open ports on them. You can discover expired SSL sets in your IP ranges. And you can find subdomains which are using vulnerable versions of popular software such as WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. And you can automate it because it's command line. You can automate the command line like using cron, but also you can automate it using a GitHub action. So here I have an example GitHub action that I created. And because Nettacker is containerized, you can just, when you create your Nettacker scan GitHub action, you can just define the image, OWASP/Nettacker, and then the version number of Nettacker that you want to use. So that's in my repo. You can go and check it out and run the GitHub action. I have this running on OWASP.org every night, and every night I get a report of all the assets. However, that is not all, because we also have a scan comparison feature. Just scanning everything and just giving it a dump of all my IP addresses and open ports is not particularly useful. What is useful is to have a scan comparison feature, and that's what we have. So you can do one scan, you discovered everything like your baseline, and then you keep scanning again, and you compare it with a previous scan, with your baseline scan. And the second something changes, It's the delta that you're interested in. What's changed from your previous scan, right? So you can find anything new which appeared on your network. Have your developers spun up new virtual machines you know nothing about? Are there any new open ports? Are there any new vulnerabilities which weren't there last week, right? And they're present today? Are there any new trivial passwords detected on your network? So for example, if you detected admin last week, is there a new server responding to admin password, right? Is there admin and password? And are there any new expired or expiring SSL certificates on the network? Because scan comparison feature allows you to run scan against a baseline scan, which is very, very useful. So we have the documentation available on nettacker.readthedocs.io. So we're still building it, but it's helpful if you want to start using this tool. If you know how to use Python, we have a package called Nettacker, so you can just run pip install Nettacker and download and start using it straight away. It's very simple. You don't have to go through different installations, and you just run pip install Nettacker, and you have Nettacker tool available instantly to you, which is very useful. If you're using Docker, you can just do Docker pull OWASP Nettacker. If you are interested in our cutting edge development version, you have to pull the dev container, the dev version. A word of warning, at the moment we have incompatibility with a Python 3.13, so please only run it on Python 3.11 and 3.12. This is due to the way how SSL works on 3.13, because we use, let's say, legacy methods of detecting weak passwords and weak TLS versions, and Python 3.13 changed the way how it works. So we are working on making it compatible, but it will not work. So if you do pip install Nettacker on Python 3.13 and it says, sorry, I can't work here, you will realize why. So please use it in a different version of Python. So here's an example where Nettacker was very useful. There was a huge Microsoft Exchange server vulnerability back in 2021, which was abused by the Chinese state actors. And we were one of the first scanners out there on the internet, even before some of the commercial scanners offered the module to scan it. You can see this is my blog post where I said we actually, our free and open source tool actually allows you to scan your network for this vulnerability. And very interestingly, I had some countries, some small countries in Southern Europe, which I will not name, when I had the governments calling me and saying, thank you very much, Sam, we'll use OWASP Nettacker to scan IP addresses of our entire country. And we found externally facing Exchange servers with this vulnerability. And another big news, OpenAI gave us a grant. So we were one of the several recipients of the OpenAI open source grant, which will allow us to use, basically we got $10,000 worth of OpenAI credits. But you can apply to it as well if you scan this QR code. If you have an open source project, you can apply for open source grant from OpenAI, and you can use ChatGPT using the OpenAI credits. They just, instead of giving you money, they give you the credit, which is very, very useful. So we plan to use AI to enhance and improve Nettacker going forward. Our modules are based on YAML, so it's very easy and simple to create new modules. You don't have to be a Python programmer. If there's a new vulnerability, or for example, you want to scan your entire network and see, do we have anything called with like a slash some secret folder on your network, you can actually use it. And because it's open source, I encourage you all to contribute. Please contribute. We are on GitHub. Submit a pull request if you have a suggestion and want to improve it. A simple one, for example, submit a language translation for the language you speak. And please go and attack your own network before the real attackers do. And I'm ready for Q&A. Thank you. Any questions? One question which is usually asked, again, I will kind of preemptively ask this question myself, is how often we release modules. Now, we are not a commercial organization. We're an open source project with only